He's got one foot in the frying pan and one in the pressure cooker. Believe me, as a bowler, I know that right about now, your bladder feels like an overstuffed vacuum cleaner bag, and your butt is kind of like an about-to-explode bratwurst.
Hey, do you mind? I wasn't talking when you were bowling.
Was I talking out loud?
We're getting ready to rock and roll. We're going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3.
Welcome to Munsons at the Movies. My name is Kyle. I'll once again be your host. Joined by the rest of the Munsons. Want to give them a wide berth.
What is called a born loser? A real Munson.
And talk a little bit about what's going on in their worlds. This time we'll start with Aubrey.
I didn't do anything. My wife had a baby.
Congratulations, dude.
Thank you. Santa Fe Catholic High School won its first regional final in 50-something years, and the first time that Mike and I had won it together. We lost in the state championship game, though. And then my birthday was 2 days after that. It's been quite the time recently. Everything is great. But I feel like now we should play the Guess the Birthday game with me. How old am I, guys?
21.
70.
Oh, Lord.
You mean in your soul or physically?
The way you two answered that is how my students answer it every time. One kid says in the 20s, another kid says full seriousness, 50-something. It's been a great time. I'm 38 years old and I love life.
James.
Congratulations to Aubrey and the family. The little guy is adorable. I am shocked that you're able to step away for a moment to speak with us. But if you need to use this time to get a couple Z's in, please feel free. I plan on speaking for the entirety of the podcast. I went to the combine with Kyle, which is pretty dope.
Oh, yeah.
I'll give my Jimmy D scouting report, which is based on nothing other than what I saw at that exact moment, because I do not follow college football closely enough. But his name is Nick Emanuari, I believe. Incredible. Totally in. Hope the Jets draft him. Other than that, that's about as far as my Jimmy D scouting report goes. Oscars were great, though. I think Conan is a breath of fresh air. I think his type of humor is what I want to see in award shows, where he's just trying to have fun up there.
Yeah, shout out to Nora, Best Picture winner.
I love the Oscars, and this was my favorite Oscars in the history of my life. Nora was my favorite movie from last year. I was losing it Sunday night.
Ace, toss it to you.
Well, apparently Oscars happened on Sunday night, but I was sleeping because 72 hours ago I contracted some food poisoning, and I basically slept for over 50 hours. And in the process, found a way to lose about 11 pounds. And I was thinking about it today, and I still feel so crappy 72 hours later that I would rather have fasted a hard fast for 72 hours and try to run a marathon than what I went through over the last couple of days. It easily was the worst physical experience I've had in my life in decades.
Oh
my God.
Really, I had a great week. It was just literally the last 3 days.
On my side, unlike you guys, this is the first time since like 2015 I didn't watch the Oscars. I had stuff going on Sunday night, which is crazy for me. So because I didn't watch it, I thought it was relevant to do Munson since the last time we recorded In Memoriam. And I'll start with Michelle Trachtenberg. Poor woman. Sounds like they had a bad liver situation, liver transplant. Very talented. Sucks to see her leave this world, but that was wild news to wake up to the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to give it a shout out for the coaches on this podcast for in solidarity to legendary coach Jimmy McGinty. Also coached a pretty important basketball team in Indiana. I don't know. Those are two actors that I really like for very different reasons that sad to see leave the world.
I saw someone describe Gene Hackman in a way. They're like, for someone who consistently tried to portray everyman's type characters, like someone you would meet, he had a commanding aura where it didn't matter if it was a small character or a side plot. When he was on the screen, he drew your attention because he was a fully committed actor for every role.
It's good that you put Michelle Trachtenberg in this In Memoriam, because I don't think she made the Oscars one.
Really?
Oh, really? I heard that Tony Todd didn't either.
Yeah, Tony Todd didn't, and I don't think Michelle Trachtenberg made it either.
Or O.J. Simpson.
Tony Todd, star of a Minotaur?
Star of Minotaur, yes, 100%.
Oh, man.
Did I watch Minotaur before this? I sure did.
Hell yeah, buddy.
Did I watch Locke? No. But did I watch Minotaur? I sure did.
I didn't even get to Bronson.
Well, rest in peace to those folks. That was some big ones to lose this past week. We're happy to have back one of our favorite guests. That's a hard transition. So, like, we're just going to lean into it, right? I don't have anything clever to say to go from one to the next.
Speaking of sadness and despair,
So on the opposite end, let's talk about things we're happy about. And that is having one of our favorite guests, Mike Rodmaker, back with us. He was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. He moved to LA in 2016 to pursue a career in photography and film. His work in those fields is focused on the outdoors, sports, and documentary filmmaking. He is an avid runner, climber, movie nerd, and popcorn enthusiast. He previously joined us for the Mahershala Ali, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Jim Carrey, Toni Collette, and Seymour Cassell episodes. One of those is unlike the others, but was just as fun as the rest. And we're happy to have you back, Mike. How are we doing?
Man, it's great to be here. Lamenting that it had been, I think, over a year since I was hopping on here again. And that's just too long, I think. It's always a good time. You know, much like in any kind of creative field, it's good to get in there and critique your own work, critique other work, and just kind of flex those muscles a little bit and keep them trained. And I think we got a great actor ahead of us this evening that I'm really excited to get into.
Mike, I will say I appreciate the trend of when you're given option of actors to choose from, you always go for best player available. If you look at this list, these are some pretty incredible actors that we've covered with you.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Any random celebrity interactions lately that we need to know? Like run into Frances McDormand at RGI? Like, what do we got?
The most recent one would have been, I did a commercial shoot with Whitney Cummings, the comedian.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Super cool.
Who was actually just fantastic and really a pleasure to work with on set, and like went out of her way to like hang out with the crew, which usually that's no treatment you get. So
incredibly jealous.
Yeah, man.
We're happy to have you back. Pull you away from Joshua Tree for a night. Let's talk some Tom Hardy.
looking forward to it.
All right, episode 115. We got birthdays on March 13th. So first and foremost, we have William H. Macy.
Ooh.
Very famous, known for projects like Fargo, Magnolia, Shameless, fantastic and Shameless, Boogie Nights, Room, Lincoln Lawyer, Mystery Men, Jurassic Park 3, and Wild Hogs. How old is William H. Macy? And yes, Wild Hogs is the worst movie of that bunch, and it's intentionally at the end.
And Jurassic Park 3 is the best movie of that bunch.
That's right.
Oh, come on. We're not going to have this discussion.
You're right. There is no discussion to be had.
I think he crushes it in Shameless. He's the one character that has no arc. He is a piece of shit from the moment you meet him, and he's a piece of shit the entire show. He's played assholes before, but like full-blown piece of shit in Shameless, which is really fun to watch. I think he's in his 60s, 64.
I'm going to go much higher than that.
Yeah.
Apologies to William H. Macy, but I'm going to say 76.
I'm going to go 72.
This to me feels like classic old white guy stuff. He looks 79, so he's probably 68.
Interesting theory. It's mostly wrong, kind of right. I don't know. He's turning 75, so Case wins that one.
Okay.
Next up, we have a guy who's not nearly as old. Spoiler. Emil Hirsch, known for projects like Into the Wild, Speed Racer, The Girl Next Door, An Evening with Beverly Loughlin.
Oh, yeah.
Lone Survivor, Milk, Lords of Dogtown, James's favorite Alpha Dog,
Please drop Alpha. You know me.
and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
He's in Lone Survivor.
Yeah, he's in Lone Survivor. He's one of the soldiers.
And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Give me 35.
44.
Yeah, I think Aubrey's closer. 48.
I'm going to say 37.
Well, he's turning 40s. Case got another one? No, well, Case. Congratulations.
I told you it's the Jordan flu game tonight.
Oh,
All right. Let's see how well you do. Maybe you can bowl a turkey since we're a Kingpin bowling podcast here.
Pressure.
Last and certainly not least, we have Common, known for things like Wanted, John Wick Chapter 2, Suicide Squad, Alice. He's actually in quite a few films, more than I thought.
Oh, yeah.
The Hate You Give, Ocean's 8, Girls Trip, Megan Levy, Selma, Now You See Me, Date Night, American Gangster, and Movie 43. We have another entry into the Movie 43 universe. How old is Common?
He's also in one of my favorite TV shows of all time, Hell on Wheels.
He's way more prolific than I thought he would be.
Oh, yeah. He's great.
amongst the greatest living rappers.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't really squeeze it in. There's so many freaking movies to mention there.
I'm just doing old rapper math. He just looks great. I think he's older than he looks.
I'm going to go 45.
He's stealing my strategy, James.
Yeah, I'm thinking 50 based on rap timelines here.
I agree with Case. I think he looks 45. I was also going to say 50. For the sake of diversity, let me take 51.
Oh, that hurts.
Yeah, good move.
54.
We'll give this one to Rodmaker. Legitimately, he's turning 53.
Oh my God.
So close.
That's a W for sure.
Price is right, did you there?
Well played.
As they're always older than they look.
Well, happy birthday to those three individuals and anybody else with a birthday on March 13th. Episode 115, we had 5 actors we threw onto the wheel. They were Terry Crews, Rose Byrne, Brooke Shields, and Julianne Moore. But it doesn't matter because the wheel selected Tom Hardy, who's got a very, let's say, accessible 65 acting credits, 15 producing credits, 4 writing credits, even created a mixtape over the years, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So, but before we get into the nitty-gritty, the minutia, the projects we liked, the projects we didn't like, we always start with a little actor trivia to see if James can stump us Fast and Furious style.
So, Mike, you're part of the initiated at this point, but for Mr. McKay's new students who are first-time listeners at home, I'm going to read off 3 facts here, 2 of which are going to be true about Tom Hardy, 1 of which is not going to be true about Tom, but will be true about one of the many illustrious cast members of the Fast and Furious franchise. The gentlemen here are going to try to guess which one that is. Fact number 1, despite his tough on-screen roles, he actually broke into acting via winning a modeling competition, and in his personal life is a skilled painter and practices Buddhist meditation daily. Fact number 2, since he had doubted that he would receive an Oscar nomination for his performance, and his co-star was certain that he would be nominated for an Oscar, they made a bet that whoever lost would have to get a tattoo chosen by the winner. Without revealing which side of the bet won, I can confirm that the losing actor honored the bet, getting a winner's handwritten message permanently tattooed on them. Fact number 3, before rising to fame, he dabbled in music, performing as a rapper and hip-hop producer, as well as contributed vocals under an alias on several albums for a hip-hop group, though he never publicly acknowledged his involvement or revealed that he was in fact the alias.
115 episodes in, and you're just still dropping bangers on us like this.
It's like AI in real life.
I've tried to research these ahead of times. I've never gotten one of them. These are great tools.
James, I hate to break it to you, but I actually know this one.
Go right ahead.
The lie is actually number 1, which is about Jordana Brewster, the star of Heart Eyes, where she plays Detective Janine Shaw, and her partner last name is Hobbs. So they make multiple references to Hobbs and Shaw in the movie. That's the lie.
That movie's great. She's terrible in that movie.
No joke. Love that movie.
The movie's awesome. She is not good in that movie.
Yeah, Jordana is also very well known for playing tough on-screen characters.
She is.
In that movie, she does.
Uh-huh.
I also think it's number 1 because I do know Tom Hardy was discovered through a modeling agency, but all those other things I'm not entirely sure of. So I'm looking through Fast and Furious actors, and I'm trying to figure out who here would be a painter and a model. And that's my metric. So I'm thinking it's Rick Yoon who played Johnny Tran, because that dude had to do some modeling at some point in time in his career.
Probably still does.
Very attractive man, I will agree.
I'm also going to take this very seriously and choose number 1 because it's the only one that I think I could possibly associate with a rapper.
Even not the one that's about rapping?
No, that one can't be about a rapper because it was like, oh, this person does it as like a side gig or whatever. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
Fair.
well, it can't be a rapper for that one. And then the second one said Oscar nominations. So, you know, I think I already made a Tyrese joke in reference to the Oscars before, so I can't run that one back. So it's got to be number 1, obviously, from process of elimination. And Ludacris.
Luda.
I am going to stray. The third one was he was featured on rap artists' albums.
Yeah, under an alias, which he has never publicly acknowledged was him.
That is definitely the lie, because I know for a fact that that was Ted Levine or Sergeant Tanner who did that.
There's no way. That man's voice is too iconic.
That's a poll right there.
It was actually Lucas Black who was trying to hide his voice. Since no one guessed number 2, I will start there and say that it is true. You guys are correct. While shooting The Revenant together, Leonardo DiCaprio predicted Hardy would actually get an Oscar nomination for his work. Hardy vehemently disagreed to the point where he's like, I'll bet on it. And whoever was right would get to place a tattoo of their choice on the loser. Hardy got the nomination. And he said that Leo wrote in real shitty handwriting the words, Leo knows everything was the tattoo he was going to get. And Hardy was like, listen, I'll be a good sport and get it, but just write it in your actual handwriting. Don't like intentionally make it this shitty. Leo obliged and wrote, instead of that, wrote Leo knows all, which Hardy got tattooed on him. I will say Hardy's got a ton of hilarious tattoos. He got his agent's name tattooed on him. He's definitely at that level of tattoos where you're like, nah, fuck, it'll be funny. And so I respect him putting that bet out there because I bet Leo was sweating it on his end.
Where'd he put it?
I got a photo here, right bicep.
There you go. Yeah, Leo knows.
It's like pretty sizable too. It's like 4 inches by 4 inches.
Fact number 3, before rising to fame, he dabbled in music, performing as a rapper and hip-hop producer. This is true. Very early in his career, he worked as a rapper and hip-hop producer with his friend Edward Tracy, and they performed under the hilarious rap name of Tommy Number 1 and Eddie Too Tall. They recorded a mixtape, which was unreleased until 2018, and Tom Hardy refused to acknowledge it was him. And it was called Falling on Your Arse in 1999.
Hilarious.
He also performed under the alias Frankie Pullitzer on multiple albums by the group Czarface. He never publicly acknowledged that it was him, even though the group has now said, yes, that was Tom Hardy. And Tom Hardy, originally, when he got on Instagram, he had his alias under his name, but it said Frankie Pullitzer, but he since removed it. I listened to a couple songs on Falling on Your Arse.
Me too.
It's not that bad. It's I want to hate it. It's not good, but it's not bad either. It's one of those things where if you found out your friend was getting into rapping and you heard it, and you'd be like, I think he might pursue this further because that's not bad. It's if it was bad, I'd be like, dude, knock this shit off, do something else. But it was pretty good. Fact number 1, despite tough on-screen roles, he broke into acting via modeling competition, and in his personal life, he's a big softie who paints and practices Buddhist meditation daily. So Tom Hardy actually did win a modeling competition in 1998 called Find Me a Supermodel, and he was 21 years old at the time. He earned a brief contract through it, but he ultimately pursued acting instead of modeling. But he isn't a painter or a practicing Buddhist. That would be Jason Momoa, who broke into acting via modeling and is also a big softie despite being a tough guy who loves to paint and is a practicing Buddhist. People obviously only know Jason Momoa for his industry-changing role in the 10th installment of the Fast and Furious franchise as the villain Dante Reyes, because Jason Momoa can play any ethnicity because he's slightly off-white. Obviously, people know that.
Well done, sir.
Really thought you were going to go rapper this time because it was teed up.
Can't go rapper when Tom Hardy himself is the rapper.
Yeah, I played myself. I fell on my arse, if you will.
He's falling on your arse.
Hey, these dad jokes are getting better, Aubrey.
I'm tired. So tired.
Good job, James. Case, what do you got for us for a box office snapshot?
This is one of those episodes where I think the films and the body of work are far more interesting than getting into the box office very deeply. So I'm just going to give you all the numbers, and then we can have a chat, and we can get into all of his great projects. Here are the comparative numbers. He's 21st in average budget at $57.7 million, 24th in world gross at $5.9 billion. Star Meter ranks 3rd at 55. Critic, 26th at 61.7%. Fan ranking, 23 with 63.7%. And he ranks 45th and 63rd in 2 different box office metrics, which gives him a overall ranking of 15th.
I'm not shocked.
I wasn't either.
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
I think he has a good mix of box office movies and dramatic roles where he was taking a shot that could be box office flops.
I find Tom Hardy to be interesting as a movie star. I feel like if I asked a lot of people if they knew what Tom Hardy looked like or sounded like, I don't think they would know.
He's a lot like his character in Warrior. Is that what I'm hearing? He just like shows up and disappears and he's good for a while.
Yeah. The roles he chooses, he's so committed to them. Like, I'm not 100% sure I know what he actually sounds like.
Yeah, correct. Going back to 2001, he has hit number 1 9 different times.
Whoa.
That's off the charts for anybody that we've covered.
Wow. Very interesting. We've been kind of all over the place last couple episodes with the box office score versus the Munson Meter. It'll be interesting to see if he lines up this time around, Case.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for your research.
You bet.
Let's get into the Tom Hardy minutia. So first major role is going to be 2002. So everything before that. He was born Edward Thomas Hardy in 1977. Someone calls him Ed at some point in time. You know why. In 98, per what James mentioned, he won that Big Breakfast Find Me a Supermodel competition. So that he would have been 21 years old at the time.
You know him as this, like, he plays tough guy characters, but what I read was, like, his dad was... Mostly his family were blue-collar firefighters. His dad was the first person to kind of break the mold of a generational firefighting family, where his dad's like, I want to go to school. I'm going to become a writer. Met his mom, who was a painter. He was raised by 2 artists, essentially, in the suburbs, and, like, kind of a good upbringing, but in the art world, right? And so when you look at him, you're like, oh, he definitely knows tough guys. He's like, no, I grew up in the burbs from a really loving, artsy family.
Yeah.
He went to Cranbrook. That's a private school. That's what I hear.
Clarence' parents had a real good marriage, all right?
Well, all of that makes sense, James, because after the whole supermodel competition and getting discovered, he studied at Richmond Drama School and then at the Drama Center London. So fully embraced, lean into the arts and into the acting world. I read that early on in his career, he said Gary Oldman was his hero, which makes a lot of sense because no one can play a baddie like Gary Oldman can. And so if that's going to be your personal acting hero, you can pick much worse than that.
What did they work together about 3-4 times?
Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, Batman.
Lawless.
Cloud 44.
When he was at school, one of his classmates was Michael Fassbender. To show the difference in how they approached their craft. He's like, there was no doubt amongst anyone in the school, he's like, myself included, that Fassbender was the best actor amongst us. He's like, he took it serious as a method actor. He's like, I'd watch him and be like, you know, like, fuck, this guy's clearly better than me. He's like, but it bothered him because he was practicing out method acting, and he's like, we'd be in like lunch line, like in between takes, and he was playing someone in a wheelchair, and I'd be like, God damn it, Michael, just order your lunch and get out of the way. Like, it's like, you're not crippled. Get out of the wheelchair.
That's funny.
His first role was in 1999. He played an uncredited role as a soldier in The Trench, kind of our prelude to some other kind of military roles in his early career. As James said, he released the mixtape in 1999, Falling on Your Arse. Band of Brothers, 2001, huge show at the time. He played a character named John in 2 episodes. I read that he actually left drama school to take on the role.
It's a good move.
It's important to note at this point that he hasn't personally addressed it yet. That comes later in his life. But when he's releasing these mixtapes and landing these major roles, he is full-blown in the throes of alcoholism and a crack addiction.
Lots of drugs.
As bad as it could be. And because of his talent and his charisma, like a lot of people who struggle with this in the music industry or in the arts, it was just kind of ignored. And it was like, well, I think you'll be great in Band of Brothers. And he's legitimately a crack addict. Like, this is someone who needs help. And at this point, everyone's just like, I don't know, man, you look great for this Black Hawk Down role. And it's just crazy to think that can like go unchecked at that level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When he got married there too, to Sarah Ward, 99, and they were divorced by 2004, I can't imagine his drug addiction was great for the marriage.
No, I mean, the timeline lines up perfectly for when he eventually gets sober.
Mm-hmm.
He was supposed to read for a movie, and he went on a bender in Hollywood, and he completely missed the meeting with John Woo and didn't even get into the movie.
Yeah, as you'd expect if you didn't show up,
To James's point, Black Hawk Down, he played Twombly. When you look at it years later, it was just this like breeding ground for all of these much bigger actors who were not very big at the time playing really small roles, and he was one of them.
Yeah, that cast list is nuts.
Mm-hmm.
I almost rewatched this. I haven't seen this in years. I almost rewatched it, but I had to choose very carefully today. And so when I saw how far down he was on the cast list, I was like,
yeah.
I honestly said to myself, I bet I won't even be able to identify which one he is.
Mm-hmm.
He'll probably have a beard, and then he'll probably be dressed in military, so he'll look like just a regular soldier.
I decided I was going to put this on and search for him. And then I'm like, I might as well watch the whole thing.
Great movie.
And that movie's captivating. His part in it, it's that quirky subplot where him and the other guy get left behind from the convoy, and they're trying to catch up to the convoy on foot. He's with the guy that he fires too close to his eardrum, so the other guy goes deaf. He ruptures his ear so he can't hear.
Oh, right.
It's a really interesting subplot that kind of breaks up the rhythm of the movie that I think makes it even a little bit more captivating.
And it just shows you like how easy it is for something to go wrong in a situation like that, where
Yeah.
you're like, ooh, we have to leg this one out. And if we don't, pretty much worst case scenario for everyone involved.
Yep. I mean, this movie's almost 25 years old, and it had me captivated. It's like a 2-hour and some change of movie.
Well, let's get to first major role for him, and that was 2002 Star Trek Nemesis. I drew this one first major. I'm not what you would call a Trekkie, right? But by being a Munson, I've watched some Star Trek movies over the years, right?
All right.
You know, when we covered F. Murray Abraham, I watched a Star Trek movie for that episode because he was the baddie in that movie. And guess what? Tom Hardy's the baddie in Star Trek Nemesis. Also important to know, growing up, I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' place, and my grandpa watched one of two things. He watched Westerns. He always had Westerns on, and he watched Star Trek. Can I remember anything from the Star Trek watching days at night, laying on the floor in the living room? No. But I watched a lot of Star Trek when I was a kid. I don't remember any of it, though. It was interesting to dive into this, especially not being a big Trekkie, but knowing enough to be dangerous, having seen the Chris Pine and the new adaptations and things like that.
This one was like prime early 2000s where like we're just kind of starting to figure out how to use computer graphics.
A plot revolving around the Enterprise, which is the famous ship in the Star Trek universe, diverting to the Romulan homeworld of Romulus, supposedly because they want to negotiate a peace treaty. Captain Picard, which we all know, and his crew discover a serious threat to the Federation once Praetor Shinzon plans to attack the Earth. And who plays Shinzon? None other than Tom Hardy. So he is the twisted, demented bad guy in this Star Trek film. In an interview that he gave years after this film came out, he said that he took the role super serious, which wouldn't shock any of you guys, right? Like, he's early in his career. He's just coming out of the gate. This is supposed to be his first big break. He admitted that he was struggling with mental health and all of his drug issues at the time. And this movie is a commercial failure. I mean, Case can look up the financials on this one. But in terms of what they thought it was going to be Star Trek-wise, it wasn't that. And the critics didn't particularly love it. And because of that, and especially because of the reception from the fans, the Star Trek fans, it hit him hard, right? Because he's thinking, I'm in a Star Trek movie. I'm the bad guy. Like, I've made it. How bad were the numbers, Case?
Budgeted for $60 million, but it did world gross $67 million. But for a Star Trek movie, that's bad.
You barely, and they're not going to make their money back because of marketing and things like that. So it lost money for sure.
For sure.
This movie led to his relationship dissolving, him seriously considering to stop acting, turning to alcohol even more, and even contemplating suicide. Like, this movie fucked him up on the back end. Young guy who just, probably wondered, did I screw this film up, whatever it happens to be. It was only when he pulled himself together by seeking professional help and starring in Bronson years later in 2008 that he got over this film. And obviously he's flourished since then. So it took him like 6-7 years to kind of get over this bump. Pretty rough. The director of this film claimed that he hated the Star Trek universe and he knew nothing about it. So you can imagine a guy who doesn't have a love for this directing an entire picture. And that's why the fans hated it, because they're like, what the hell? Even Frakes called this a huge disappointment when he wasn't telling you about magic tricks. For his part, Baird expressed his frustration, the Blu-ray commentary at having to tell a story in an established universe with pre-existing design and character relationships. hated having to utilize recycled sets and props, and had trouble remembering the names of the main cast. So this dude would like never direct a Marvel picture because he just felt like creative restriction. He didn't want. It's like, why did you agree to do a Star Trek movie, dude? Like, what's going on here?
Todd.
It was clear to me early on that Tom had a lot of presence. Like, has a lot of screen presence in this role. Even at his early age, there's a gravitas about the way that he commands when he's on screen, because he plays a character who's slowly dying, who essentially needs to do a blood transfusion with Picard and is essentially trying to like ethically kind of get him, but it then turns to kidnapping and then turns him being a madman when he realizes his plan's not going the way he wants it to. I felt like his voice they brought in, like, it was kind of eerily reminiscent of what he brings to Bane later. It was a deeper voice that I was like, I can track that. I could see how that same guy plays those two roles.
Yeah.
But he's got to play a character that's showing this like steady decline into madness, and he does a good job with that. When you look back years later, and this is the only Star Trek film that failed to open at #1 at the domestic box office. It came in second to Made in Manhattan that year, by the way, if you want to wonder who beat it out.
Oh, that is rough.
Good movie.
Halo rules.
I didn't hate the movie, but I'm also not a Trekkie. I liked what Tom Hardy was doing, but I don't have the established universe to compare it to, and I know the fans really hated this movie, so that's my take.
I mean, this is obvious, but like, he looks super young. I think he was 25 years old when he made this. He's playing someone, without giving away too much, who is supposed to be, I guess, a pretty young person, but like the gravitas of the role is not compromised as a result of that, which is really easy to do with poor casting. So I think he really played that one well.
Yeah.
That's a shame to hear that he took that one so personally. And it's funny too, because like Star Trek, Star Wars, the Marvel universe, like fans are just so crazy about these things that the expectations are so high. And if you don't give them that and more, obviously they're just going to hate it. But it certainly wasn't for him. It sounds like, from what you said, Kyle, there were a plethora of reasons not to like this one. But I don't think he was any cause of that at all. I totally agree. You can see the talent. You could see the beginnings of Bane there, but like with a little bit more refinement to him.
I would highly recommend, if you are a Tom Hardy fan, go watch this movie just to see his performance. Keep your expectations low with the film, especially if you appreciate Star Trek. But
Green Rat ranked him the second best Picard villain.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, they agree.
I was going to say, I'll give Star Trek fans credit. Those other fan bases you mentioned, like the Marvel fans and the Star Wars fans, like if you're not in their tribe and you criticize their movie, you'll be like, hey man, this movie / episode kind of sucks. And they'll be like, you suck. Only we're allowed to say things suck. You're the worst. Yep. With Star Trek fans, I feel like the vibe's more like, hey, this one kind of sucks. And they're like, yeah, they're not all winners, but you know, what can you do? And like, they kind of easy. They're like, yeah, we didn't like that one either, but that other one was pretty dope, right? Like, I don't know. They seem more accepting of outside people.
It's way less toxic, Star Trek fandom.
Yeah.
Much more of a Reddit vibe.
I agree with that. From what I've seen, they might be like the best fan base.
Yeah.
This is coming from a Harry Potter fan. I hate some of the people that roll with me. It's bad out here for a franchise. But the Star Trek people, they seem all right.
We got 9 years until our next role. So we've got first Dot the Eye. We played Tom, 2003. It's like a weird exploitation movie. He's like caught in a love triangle. And then it turns out the other guy in the love triangle is actually a documentary filmmaker who's been manipulating the two the whole time. And Tom Hardy plays one of that guy's like little posse of who is helping him make the movie. I just found it interesting to watch some of the early Tom Hardy stuff, the stuff I'd never heard of, and this is one of them. I don't know if I recommend it, but it was interesting, I'll say that. 2003, he went to rehab for his alcohol and cocaine addictions, right? His crack cocaine addiction, so trying to get his help there. And then 2004, he's in Layer Cake, which is an awesome movie. He's barely in it. He is not a player in that film at all, but that movie's fantastic.
In my professional life, I work for the organization that works with people who deal with substance use disorders. And so his story of how he sobered up is one that you hear a lot. I think it's fun to share because it's somewhat inspiring, where he went to rehab pretty much just to get people off his back. And his plan was, I'm going to go for a little while until everyone stops giving me shit, and then I'll just go back to drinking. And when he got there, it was the other people that were there that made him realize, I do have a problem and I'm going to work to sober up. Because when people share their stories, all of a sudden he started hearing intimate details that sounded exactly like him that he hadn't shared with people, but it was coming from people who knew that they had a substance use problem. And that's when he's like, ah, shit. Like, I think I do have a problem. And he's been sober since 2003. So credit to him. That's really impressive.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing those stories, especially because it seems like the fame circle, whatever version of that is, in this case it's Hollywood, it seems impossible from an outsider's perspective to stay sober in that situation.
Well, when you get somebody that's talented and they're performing well, sometimes they're encouraged to continue.
Mm-hmm.
It's even more commendable that he was willing to risk maybe losing some, trust and faith that people had in him trying to deal with his addictions.
Now that I remember this line, I thought it was really interesting because it's so reflective. When people were like, oh, did you always know you wanted to be an actor? He's like, no, but I did know I was a great liar. Like my whole life, I was so good at lying. I didn't want to have a normal job. So I realized as an actor, I could get paid to lie, which is something I was doing all the time in my personal life anyway. And it's him kind of reflecting on his sobriety, but realizing like part of my skill was hiding this from other people.
Yeah.
And it turned me into the actor that I am.
The last thing I'll note on Layer Cake is I read that that's the role that caught people's attention for Daniel Craig to become 007.
Ooh.
Absolutely.
Put him on the radar of people. So I think it's worth checking out. Not really for Tom Hardy, but if you want to see Daniel Craig like pre-007 do his thing.
Yeah, super slick, fun movie.
Which I think led him to being nominated for the Laurence Olivier Award for Most Promising Newcomer in 2004 in the British scene. That same year, he was in a film called The Reckoning with Willem Dafoe. Marie Antoinette, 2006, he played Ramont, Kirsten Dunst movie.
If I had more time, I probably would have watched this next. Sofia Coppola, and I've heard the movie's really interesting. I just wasn't sure how much he was in it.
He's pretty far down the casting list, and it's not one that pops up when you like search his name on like the Prime, the Apple TVs, anything like that. So I don't think you get a lot of Tom Hardy in that movie. I also skipped in there Minotaur, which Case mentioned, that classic Tony Todd, Tom Hardy picture. Big role, Case.
Lead role. He's the hero.
He is the hero. That is true.
I mean, he saved the world. Well, it's about a band of travelers led by our hero who battle a minotaur, half human, half bull. Pretty underwhelming as a whole.
No way. You mean it's 3.7 out of 10 on IMDb would tell you otherwise? Come on.
This looks like it was his first movie ever.
It did. I'm guessing he was just looking for work at this time, and this was a poor choice.
Got to make that money.
I will forever remember Minotaur and dot the I, so there's something to be said there.
I mean, I'm disappointed in Aubrey. It's a creature feature.
Yeah, man.
Not my type of creature feature. Rest in power, Tony Todd. This was not for me.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, nope. It
wasn't for anybody. It wasn't for anybody.
Glad I watched it, though.
Stuart, a Life Backwards. He plays Stuart. 2007 got a BAFTA nom. First of a couple roles where Tom Hardy has no problem getting naked on screen, and which I always respect actors that willing to shed it all.
I started this in one of my I don't know, it was probably 3 a.m. yesterday. I didn't finish it, not because the movie was bad. I just didn't finish it. But I've seen part of it. It's an interesting performance from him.
It is.
He's not so much doing like a homeless thing as he is doing a mental health thing. Seems like he's.
Yep.
I didn't get far enough to really get into what that was, but to me, this is as far back I think as I went in his career. And the thing that you see in that, which is true about everything he does, is the commitment to his character, which makes even something that could be borderline too much, he makes it feel grounded. So I found that performance to be really enlightening.
I agree with everything you said. His character goes off the deep end multiple times, and it never feels exploitative. So it makes sense why he would get a BAFTA nom for this. The spotlight is on him. And speaking of the spotlight, him as Charles Bronson in 2008's Bronson.
I had a friend tell me who loves Tom Hardy. He was like, dude, you gotta watch Bronson, but you're not watching it for the movie. You're just watching it for Tom Hardy. This is true with some Nicholas Winding Refn stuff. I felt this way about the Neon Demon. There's some stuff I love, and there's some stuff I hate.
Same.
With the Neon Demon, there was more that I loved than I hated, so I came out positive on the movie.
Agreed.
With Bronson, there was more that I hated than I loved. But Tom Hardy is in insanely good in this. I don't know if I'll ever watch this movie again. This movie and this performance will be one of the first things that comes to mind when I'm asked, like, what are the great performances you've seen? This will be one of the ones that comes out. I just found it to be, like, so remarkable.
Is it a heavy watch?
Weird watch.
Narratively, it jumps around all over the place, and the final act is just him taking a guy hostage, just abusing the guy in the weirdest ways possible.
The reporter from Ted Lasso.
Trent Krim. Yeah.
Yeah. To me, it doesn't come across heavy at all because I'm more caught up in what is like actually happening on screen than anything thematically.
It's a spectacle. He's the most notorious prisoner in British history, right? Like, that's a big deal to be casted as that person. I mean, part of it is you look like him, so that helps. But
well, the scene where he does the bit where he's like recreating a scene where it's him and a woman and he's like turning back and forth is insanely good. From like a directing standpoint, from a writing standpoint, from an acting standpoint, I would say for people who really love movies, it's worth it to just see that scene and some of the other stuff that comes across. But like, you're really just there for what Tom Hardy's doing.
Tom Hardy was so good in this movie that the prison system banned him from ever visiting prisons because he brought so much attention and celebrity to Bronson. Did you see who was originally offered this movie? It's a Munsons at the Movie favorite.
Margot Martindale.
John Lithgow.
Jason Statham was offered the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I did see that.
When he read the scene about him lathering himself up with butter, he turned it down.
One note I have, which is funny because I don't think this would be said about Jason Statham, was Hardy met with the actual Charles Bronson multiple times before filming to get like a better understanding of who he was and how he acted.
Yeah.
You know, England's most notorious inmate was so impressed with how Hardy was able to match his muscularity and also his personality, like that he said, he's like, I think Tom Hardy's the only person who could ever play me. So much so that he went, sometimes forget that you're talking to a psychopath. And he shaved his mustache off and mailed it to Tom to be worn as the mustache in the movie.
What a gesture.
I guess he's also method.
And then that's when you like check back in, like, what is it, like Mindhunter style? You're like, oh, right, I forgot this guy's fucking insane. Ah.
I saw a Watch Mojo top 10 performances list, and they listed his role as Handsome Bob in RockNRolla as number 10 in there. I haven't seen it, so I can't speak to it, but this was on the list of their top 10 Tom Hardy roles. Apparently he plays a gay character in this crime mob film, and I think that was maybe pointing to like the novel concept of him falling for like the main bad guy in the movie. I don't know.
Also brought on one of the funnier quotes from any actor ever in regards to their sexuality. He was asked, you know, how do you prepare for playing a role like this? And he was just like, I'm an actor. Of course, I've done gay stuff.
I remember that.
All right, fair enough.
Hilarious. I've seen enough interviews where he's not afraid to tell people their stupid questions.
No.
I love that.
All right, a film we've talked about 5 times before, and welcome. We're just basically knocking out this entire cast of Inception because he plays Eames in 2010 alongside JGL, Leo, Elliot Page, Ken Watanabe, Michael Caine.
Said it all 5 times, so I'll say it a 6th time. This movie blew my mind when I first saw it. It still holds up to this day. It's on my Mount Rushmore of sci-fi movies.
And yet he doesn't understand or know what the movie's about.
I think we need to celebrate people who don't pretend to be intellectuals when they're not intellectuals.
Yes.
I think that needs to be cherished, the authenticity of being like, hey, like, not everyone is good at everything, and that's okay.
Yep.
So this is the first time I've talked about this movie, though. I've missed all the other ones.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Go off.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah, I was supposed to be on the Leo one, and I wasn't.
That's right.
So I missed all the other ones. Well, do we talk about it with Michael Caine? Because he wasn't in it that much.
Not much. I mean, he plays the professor, a really small part. So
I don't remember talking about it then. But I watched it today. This is probably the 3rd time I've seen this movie, and the 1st time in a long time. I love it. It's an amazing movie. I couldn't place Tom Hardy in it, which is why I rewatched it. Like, I vividly remember a lot of this movie, but I was just like, I know he's in it, but I don't know what he does or anything like that. The only thing that I really kind of walked away from this time is I feel like I came to a stance on the ending that I feel comfortable with.
Oh, you feel like you made a decision on what actually happens with the spinner?
So I'm been far removed from this conversation, even though I've heard a lot of people have it and I've participated in it a bunch of times. But my stance is I don't think it doesn't matter, because that's the movie's about choices. In that moment, to me, Leo's choosing his reality. So it doesn't matter if he's in a dream or not. It felt really empowering.
Knowing Christopher Nolan, I would guess that was very much in his intention.
I love how his character's screwing with JGL the whole movie. It's hilarious.
Yeah, he's like the shapeshifter guy, right? He's the guy who mimics the other people.
He pretends to be Tom Berenger the whole movie.
It seems like Tom Hardy would just showed up to this to like be ultra charming and remind everybody that like, hey, I'm also like really charming, and just be a badass.
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
He's fashionable, right? He's polite. Like, yeah.
Was this a Bond audition?
Ooh, maybe. I like the moment of levity his character adds with like one line when they get all the way to the very end and they run out of time, and he's like, "Oh, really? That's it?" I'm like, yeah. He's like, "Really wanted to know what was in there." It's like the whole movie led up to this point. It's like, shit, he almost had it.
Would you all say this was first movie where a majority of audiences acknowledged and remember him from? I know it's not obviously not his first appearance, certainly, and not his first major role, but this is the first time that I was aware of Tom Hardy.
Same here.
My wife said that.
For American audiences, probably the first big movie.
This is his biggest box office yet. It's $160 million budget, and the highest before this was Blackout Down, which, like Aubrey said, he was barely in it.
Yeah, this put him on for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
2011, he narrated the movie From the Ashes. It has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
In so many roles, he has kind of a tough voice. Like, it's tough to understand him sometimes. And so I was curious what he sounded like in a narrator role. While I didn't watch this one, I watched the All or Nothing, Tottenham. I watched a couple episodes of that, and he is very articulate and very, very good as a narrator. And I found that very interesting with some of the projects that I've seen. And I almost wondered, because it seems like the roles where he has a British accent, he's actually easier to understand for me versus when he's playing American roles. And I always wonder if he just feels like he has to take kind of a unique approach to his American accents because he doesn't get it as good. I love the choices he makes, but it's just really interesting to me. I really appreciated his narrating.
It's one of my criticisms, I guess, is it's clearly an artistic choice he makes, but his accents are all over the place, man.
All over the place.
When he does an American accent, you're like, I guess that's New York. I guess that's Boston. It's like a mix. And then when he does English accents, like it really depends on where he thinks that character is from in England, because it could just be his normal voice, or it could be like barely penetrable, like clearly English, like slang. And like I need to put subtitles on. I have no idea what he's saying right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I watched more movies with subtitles in this episode than any other episode we've done.
I watched a majority of his stuff with subtitles on.
So do I, and I think his accent work is great, and I still am like,
Yeah, it's like sometimes it works.
great. Let me throw those on just to make sure.
Yeah.
Case, do you know when he was narrating, was he narrating in a character, do you know, or was it like his natural speaking voice, or we'll never know what his natural speaking voice is?
I probably watched about a dozen talk shows with him on it, and it sounded like his normal voice to me.
Inception is him, right? That's his normal speaking voice, right?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Yeah.
Pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as Al Pacino said in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, what a picture. Warrior 2011
Oh,
plays Tommy. I watched this yesterday. I cried. I cry every time I watch this movie.
it's my favorite Tom Hardy role. I love this movie.
Same. I think the acting across the board is incredible in this movie. Nick Nolte in particular is my favorite performance in this film. Everything they do in the movie to build up the storylines is perfect because it makes you root for everyone involved in this.
Yep.
Even Nick Nolte, who was a shitty dad.
Even Nick Nolte.
And you know someone has to lose, and that's the part that hurts all of this.
And it's interesting placing it in context with his personal adventures and addiction, he is brutal towards his dad about with his addiction, and like that was coming from somewhere. It was interesting
For sure.
That scene in Casino where he chucks the money in his face and says, "Go and get more of your tapes." I was just like, Jesus fucking Christ, man! These two are on a different planet.
Yeah.
This was my first time watching this movie. I'd heard nothing but great things about it.
Oh,
My review of it is like, it is better than it has any right to be.
Yeah.
It is an emotional sports movie, which those usually peak at a certain level. And I think the reason it works is because of the nuance each role is given. Like, they let these characters really kind of add layers to it that you don't really get for such a straightforward kind of sports underdog story.
Great.
To the point where, like, well, as the story's developing, you're like, all right, I see where this is going, but like, is that it? And then as it gets there, it does have the emotional weight that it earns the emotional payoff. They kind of add these layers that you're like, oh shit, why was that discussed 30 minutes ago? Well, it's because of this. Like,
two different underdogs in two different ways.
It's what happens when you take a standard plot and infuse it with nuance and great performances.
yeah.
This movie's phenomenal.
I actively don't really like MMA and UFC stuff. Like, I don't care about that form. But this movie captivates me. And the fighting is pretty authentic, too, from what I could tell. It's not like a really terrible boxing movie where dudes are like, no one blocks. Like, people block.
Oh, yeah.
In MMA, like, it's not just dudes dropping face shots on each other the whole time.
I heard in an interview where I think he said he broke his toe, tore some ligaments in his hand. Another guy broke his neck. There's a lot of injuries in the filming of this. It was brutal.
I'd be shocked if Ed Edgerton didn't get injured because he gets the shit kicked out of him for 2 hours in this movie. Getting tossed around like a rag doll all movie.
He might have been the one that got broken ribs, now that I think about it.
I would be shocked.
The one thing I loved about the way this movie was written is I didn't care at the end which of those two won.
Yeah, 100%.
The first time I watched it, I'm like, this could be awesome. No matter who wins, I'm on board.
The gambler in me was like, I would just fucking have an understanding with my brother.
50-50, baby.
Yeah, I was like, listen, winner gets an extra $500K. Like, is that like, we'll split the rest? Like, is that cool?
That subplot with the family drama, though, cut pretty deep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think Hardy's character was too interested in working with anybody.
Oh, for sure.
No.
Great movie.
Great nuances. Yeah, Nick Nolte is my MVP for that movie, but Tom Hardy's a close second, I think.
Yeah.
Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy played Ricky alongside Gary Oldman here, 2011.
First time watched.
Oh, what'd you think?
I love it. Definitely a movie I have to watch again, though, because there's a lot going on.
It's methodically slow.
So it's slow, which is something that I'm kind of used to, because it's a very, very British movie, and that happens from time to time. But what makes it feel even more methodical is the lack of music.
Oh, that's right.
There's not a ton of score. His performance kind of caught me off guard a little bit.
I remember Gary Oldman going and doing the press for this, and he loved this movie and could not speak more highly of this flick. And so I was very excited to see it. And I was caught off guard a little bit by how methodical it was.
Tom Hardy he almost brings energy to what's going on. At least comparatively, there's a little bit more kinetic energy behind what he's doing.
I probably saw this like 8 or 9 years ago, Aubrey, and everything you just said explains why I didn't love it at the time. I probably need to rewatch it, but I was so ungodly bored the first time I watched it. I was like, I'm good. I'm out on Tinker Tailor.
Which I get. And like the action is in the dialogue, except not really.
Yes.
It's in the dialogue in the sense of like, it's a really cool mental exercise.
Yeah.
But it's a dope movie if you could find a way. Like, it's just not accessible to everybody, which I get.
Well, and I think that led to him winning the Rising Star Award at the BAFTAs in 2011, his performance in this film. It certainly wasn't for this next movie we're going to talk about, a lowest critic score. And that was This Means War.
Oh, no.
Plays Tuck alongside Angela Bassett, and Aubrey has it.
God bless you, Aubrey.
You would think that with everything going on,
Yep.
Kyle would help me out.
Yep.
Now I know where we stand, Kyle, because I get This Means War, which means I've now seen this movie twice in my lifetime.
Wow.
Oh.
because I watched it once a long time ago, and I spent days trying to remember what happened in this movie so I wouldn't watch it again.
It was a lighthearted watch comparatively to the rest of his filmography.
The story of this 2012 romantic comedy, directed by the great MCG,
Ooh.
is that two CIA agents and best friends fall in love with the same woman. This movie not only is bad on all fronts, the action is terrible in a way that is shocking for a movie in 2012. It's a movie that shoots action in a way that, like, you don't want anyone to see that there's any action happening. Like, hyper edited. It's also wildly problematic. So Tom Hardy's Tuck meets Reese Witherspoon via internet dating. So one, this movie wants me to believe that both of those human beings have to find dates via the internet.
Possibly.
And then they find each other, which is sidebar. If we're going to do internet dating and I'm going to live in a world where Reese Witherspoon and Tom Hardy are doing internet dating and they meet each other, I would be so mad. Like, cause that's like your real chance to bag Reese Witherspoon. And she meets Tom Hardy, I would be so mad. And so after their date, which goes amazingly, she runs into Chris Pine in a Blockbuster that appears to be in a mall. I spent a lot of time thinking about the logistics of a Blockbuster in a mall and how cool that would be. Chris Pine persists to drop movie knowledge on Reese Witherspoon, and she kind of hates him.
Right.
Because he's like arrogant and kind of pompous and a ladies' man, but somehow leads to a date anyways because he stalks her and shows up at her work and accosts her in front of her employees and essentially doesn't blackmail her, but strong arms her into a date.
Mm-hmm.
This leads to a gentleman's agreement between Tuck and Chris Pine's FDR, which I couldn't get past the fact that his name was FDR. They make an agreement that they won't hate each other. They won't have sex with Reese Witherspoon and some other stupid rules. And then you lead into probably 45 minutes of the two of them dating her, where one of them is dating her and the other one is legitimately spying on her. And they would rotate. They've tapped this woman's phones. They put cameras in her houses. They've broken into her houses while she's singing Montel Jordan in a way that just made me feel gross.
At the same time. They're both in there at the same time while she's singing Montel.
Uh-huh. They're spying on each other's dates, which leads to these other CIA agents who are not smart enough to figure out why they're spying on this random woman. Watching her have sex with men is what these people end up doing and providing the information back to FDR and Tuck, which is wild. Movie never really reconciles with that. She gets kidnapped by the big bad who was in this movie for like 7 seconds.
Yep. Till Schweiger.
And ends with her choosing which one of the two she wants to be with via rolling car on an interstate.
Can we ask who they think she picked?
Yeah, you seem more into this than I do. Did she go with Tom Hardy or did she go with Chris Pine?
She didn't pick either of them.
Oh, she picked one.
Definitely picked one.
Oh, all right. I'm on. I guess I lost.
I saw it.
I think James left, which I respect.
James is watching This Means War right now.
Yeah, I'm like halfway through.
She chooses Chris Pine for reasons that no one actually understands or knows. Outside of the fact that Tom Hardy's baby's mom, because they don't establish that they were ever married, is in the movie, which that's the only reason why she actually chooses Chris Pine, is because we have an established character for Tom Hardy to also fall in love with.
It's got to be a happy ending for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, this movie's very bad. I try not to do this where I just don't say anything positive, but I don't actually have anything positive to say about this movie. I think it's bad in all phases. I think the performances are actually bad. I think Chris Pine and Tom Hardy are both bad. They're like banter. It's odd. It's very rarely funny, which is sad because this is the type of movie I would think, not this type of movie. A romantic comedy is something that I would like to see Tom Hardy in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The one stab I get at it, a really unfortunate one.
Well, I guess one positive, Aubrey, is that it ended.
I got another one.
It was less than 2 hours.
Yeah.
There's a moment where I think it was Chris Pine's staff was like questioning, like, is this legal? Because he kept saying, you know, it's along the lines of this bigger plot. We're trying to look into it. He goes, we okay to do that? And he pauses for a second. And he goes, yeah, it's good. Patriot Act. I did chuckle at that one a little bit.
He did say that. Yes, he did say that. It's a great joke.
Yep. We're suddenly finding all sorts of positives here.
No, that joke, it's less than 2 hours, and there's a Blockbuster in a mall, I think.
Tom Hardy's filmography, as someone who like occasionally watches the movies, the actors we cover with my partner, is he's got a very aggressive, violent filmography, right? There's not a lot of like good, calm watches. So I was like, well, this means war. That's lighthearted. Let's go.
Yeah.
Poor woman's like, why did you make me watch?
Are you still apologizing?
You know what's sad about this?
Oh, no.
I'm on the Wikipedia page for This Means War. The budget was $65 million, and the box office was $156 million.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I feel like This Means War is what Aubrey felt being assigned lowest critic score and getting that war is happening.
It's 2 weeks in a row. I'm just saying. But all right. Happy birthday to me. No, it's great. Tom Hardy has all these movies to watch. All of these things I could get for Tom Hardy, and I get This Means War. But that's cool. No, it's all right.
Aubrey, I want to apologize in advance about how deep my Mad Max review is, because it's probably the most important movie I've ever reviewed. And so I apologize in advance.
There's only one person that should be apologizing here.
MCG. MCG.
I know. He rigs the game. He's like the carny with the ring toss, where it's clearly rigged against the participants, and he's like, "Oh, anybody could make it. My little kids could make it. You can't." He's a carny.
No, I'm Joe Dirt with the Pam. This ain't UNICEF. Let's go from what is possibly the absolute worst of Tom Hardy to probably the absolute best of Tom Hardy, to Dark Knight Rises as Bane alongside JGL, Michael Caine, and Juno Temple.
Phenomenal.
And Juno Temple. I love this movie. I love this performance. I know we mentioned how he makes weird accent choices, but I will say some of them are inexplicable. But when they work, they really add a level to a character that I don't think anyone else could have seen coming. And I think Bane is a really good example of that. Because of how good this performance is, people forget that Bane is like not like this in the comic books. Bane is a meathead who's stronger and he beats up Batman, but he wears a luchador mask. He's not what Tom Hardy and Christopher Nolan turned him into. And Tom Hardy's choice to give him like a sophisticated Englishman from, like the 19th century's accent. I remember people hated this when it first tested. And then when you watch the movie, it makes this brute murderer even scarier because he's smart and he's calculated and he's figuring out ways in the background to beat people with this soft-spoken voice, and then he will kill someone right on the spot in front of you. It's just like a different level to it by making the choice to make him like this very sophisticated sounding man.
Did you guys hear who he based his voice on?
Mm-hmm.
It was a guy named Bartley Gorman, who's known as King of the Gypsies, and he was a bare-knuckle brawler. And he saw an interview of this guy, and he played it for Nolan, and he goes, "We could do this, or we could do something along the lines of Darth Vader." And Nolan's like, "Nope, do that guy." And it was weird to see an interview with Tom Hardy speaking normally, and then all of a sudden he breaks into vein, kind of like we talked about with Alan Tudyk, where it's just kind of offsetting to see him go into this character and this voice that you didn't expect.
You merely adopted the dark.
Yeah.
Explored it.
That's one of the hardest lines I've ever heard in a movie. He's probably got 4 or 5 of those.
Yeah.
Bangers.
Aubrey, that monologue, like you go back and watch it, villains have monologues all the time. What makes that one work is there's no music, there's no fanfare. The only noise you hear is Batman getting the shit kicked out of him. While Bane is like real casually talking shit. He's like, "Oh, you think you're going to beat me with, theatricality?" He's like, "Oh, what the fuck?" And boom, choke slam. Be like, "Are you even trying right now? Like, I'm killing you." Right? It really drives home the fact where it's like, yeah, what you've normally done isn't good enough. I don't see how Batman wins this. And I fell for it hook, line, and sinker the first time I watched that movie. I was like, "Oh, he's dead. He's dead. It's over."
Everything you said, James, about this character is why I hate the ending of this movie.
You don't like how he gets offed?
No. I love The Dark Knight Rises. I love it, even with its flaws. I love The Dark Knight Rises, the one I'm mentioning now, and the other ones that anybody could mention because there are many.
Okay.
I would give it a straight 10 out of 10 if it wasn't for the fact that at the end they go, actually, Marion Cotillard has been pulling the strings the whole time, and Tom Hardy's character is just a sidekick.
Bodyguard.
Which, if that's true to the comics, cool, that's great. I love that, but that's not the story you were telling me.
I agree.
You created a villain that was dominant and intelligent and incredible. And then you just cut him at the knees at the end. And I felt like it was so deflating. It's undoubtedly to me that the better villain is Heath Ledger's Joker. The one I would watch, if you said you can only watch one of these, I'd watch Bane.
Mm-hmm.
Because Bane to me is thrilling. He says some of the dopest shit a villain has ever said to a human being. And that's how I want my villains to talk, like real shit. And he really does. When he lays his hand, the back of his hand on the dude's shoulder,
that's the best,
and looks him in the face and says, "Do you feel in charge?" Chills. It's powerful.
Ben Mendelsohn.
What Tom Hardy does with that character is insane, especially under that amount of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Because he has to follow Heath Ledger's Joker. I love Bane.
Mm-hmm.
Every time he's on screen, I perk up.
Fully agree.
All Tom Hardy stuff is like ADR.
I would have to imagine. So there's clearly some effects added to that as well, like kind of the breathing and everything else too.
Yep.
I think this movie's amazing, and I'll stand on this, and I'll say this every single time we talk about this movie. The most unrealistic thing in this entire movie is Hines Ward returning a kickoff return for a touchdown.
The reason I reference this movie often is when two teams that I don't like are playing each other in football, and people are like, who do you want to win? I always just say, I want Bane to show up.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle, don't we have a guest Munson that was at the filming of this scene?
Yeah, Lauren.
That's right.
That's cool.
She got to see Hines Ward pretend to be athletic for a moment. That's really good for her. I'm proud of her.
Come on.
All right, let's talk about Lawless. Played Forrest, 2012, alongside Jessica Chastain. Banger.
Love this movie.
Love it.
I love this movie.
Lawless, awesome. And he's fantastic. He's elite.
Mm-hmm.
He's fantastic.
He's so good in this. Again, making voice choices. It's something that Tom Hardy does really well, which some I talk about all the time. He's able to communicate a lot without saying a lot. He's really in his bag in this stage of his career doing that. The Forrest character is different than Bane in how he brings him forward, but no less intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
So he's able to show nuance in the two different people by just how he uses his presence. It's very intimidating. It's very like in control. We know who the badass is in this city.
Oh, yeah.
We know who it is. We know who everyone's scared of, and we know why.
Yeah.
Tom Hardy just blows the doors off of Lawless.
Mm-hmm.
He makes that person a legend in my mind, and I love it.
It's crazy how he's the lead of this movie, and he probably has the fewest lines. That's how impressive he is in this movie.
Well, Jessica Chastain doesn't have very many lines.
But she's not the lead.
It's a different reason, though. I've got problems with that for a whole nother. It's the only thing I don't like about this movie is they really sidelined her in a problematic way.
Yeah, that's fair.
100%.
He doesn't talk like that.
Just presence. He doesn't have to say much.
It's all presence, and it's
Yeah,
brilliant.
You see that a little bit in Bike Riders
Oh, yeah.
from a year and a half ago.
Mhm.
His role in Lawless, you could see 100% aligned straight to Bike Riders, and like he doesn't say a lot, but he carries that same leadership for his group, and he's intimidating in a slightly different way, but still same vein of like you don't have to say much, but people know his deal. 2013 Locke plays Ivan Locke in a car. Is it like Buried but in a car? Like it's just one containment story?
No, all 80 minutes he's in the car.
Oh, like Need for Speed.
Well, I don't know about that either. But the difference between this and Buried is like a thriller. He's got to find a solution to his problem. Locke isn't a thriller in that way. I marvel at this movie. I think this movie is incredible, mostly because of Tom Hardy. It's something that I wouldn't recommend to hardly anybody.
It's like very theatrical. It goes to his theater background, I would imagine.
The anxiety behind trying to find a solution to a problem and not being physically present to solve that problem. And so what you get is a guy who his life basically is snowballing and crumbling right in front of him, and he's trying to put out all the fires. And the difference between this and any other movie that has that machination is that he's in a car and can't physically fix those things. So he has to deal with a conflict at work, but he has to deal with it in his car. And you can see and feel the angst of him trying to solve these things and not fully being able to do it because he's not there. And very few people can make a movie like this, because very few people can hold your attention for that long doing that simplistic of a thing. But Tom Hardy can. He also has a Welsh accent, which is a flex.
Yeah, it's very well regarded. It's one that people constantly put in as like top 5 performances. So
yes, top tier performance.
I was too busy watching Minotaur, man. I didn't have time for Locke. Right?
Yeah.
He meant to say enjoying Minotaur.
He met Charlotte Riley on the set of Wuthering Heights back in 2008. They got married in 2014. Still together today. Have 2 sons together. That's a show we didn't mention, so I guess it's snuck into the show notes one way or the other. But so second marriage, good for him. Still cruising along.
From everything I've read, things are great. So much so that I think it led to some issues in his filming of Mad Max Fury Road. But yeah, everything I've read, things are good.
And then last thing before we get to Mad Max would be his role as Alfie in Peaky Blinders, 13 episodes between 2014 and 2022.
You want to talk about subtitles?
You can't understand a word he says, and he steals every scene, so you definitely want to understand what he's saying.
I think that show is rated amongst the most difficult to understand the dialogue.
Oh, for sure.
It routinely comes up at the top of lists.
It is also routinely added to the conversation of greatest TV shows I've ever seen when people talk about greatest TV shows they've ever seen. I love Peaky Blinders. But when James says that Tom Hardy steals every scene, there's 2 people that are guest stars in that show throughout its run. And they're the only 2 people that can really take the shine off of Cillian Murphy. And it's Adrian Brody and Tom Hardy.
Okay.
Tom Hardy shows up in Peaky Blinders. And you're like, who is this guy? Why is he this way? I'm obsessed with him. I want him to show up as many times as possible. I love his performance in this.
He plays Alfie Solomon, who's Jewish gangster, who's like a rum runner. And when you first meet him is exactly how he is when you last meet him. And I think that's what makes him such an interesting character, where he's like, from the jump, I am a criminal. I only care about me. I will fuck you over if I have to. And he's charming while he's having these very blunt, sinister conversations. And he's funny, and he's clearly devoutly Jewish, but he's also very clearly accepting that he's a criminal and like a murderer. You watch him on screen and their chemistry is great. Like, he likes Tommy, Cillian Murphy, but he like tries to fuck him over all the time because he's like, Tommy, like, I never pretended to be something I'm not. Where's the honor amongst thieves here? Like, of course I'm trying to screw you over. This is what I do for a living. And it makes you like respect him because there is no gray area. It's like, yeah, of course he did the bad thing. The only reason he doesn't do the bad thing is because we make money together. Like, he's going to do that if there's more money to be made somewhere else. And when he's on screen, he just steals it.
He's the type of supporting character that pops up in great television series that spinoffs are made about.
Okay.
Because he drops in fully formed. You don't get a ton of development with him because he's not a main character, but everything he does is interesting.
Mm.
So you're like, I could watch this guy do what he actually does all the time.
One of my favorite scenes in the show is Cillian Murphy is trying to figure out who's kidnapped his son. And he pulls Tom Hardy aside and is like, so did you sell me out? Did you know they were going to kidnap my son? And Tom Hardy's like, yeah, I did sell you out. And he's like, they kidnapped my son. He's like, why would I give a shit that they kidnapped your son? Like, why do you keep saying that? Tom Hardy's got a gun in his face and he's like about to die. He's like, no. If you're going to kill me, do it for a right reason. If you think it's because your son was kidnapped, he's like, that's pretty hypocritical. He's like, how many sons and fathers have you killed? He's like, if you're going to kill me for a good, like he's about to die. And he's like, no, I'm not going to let you think that your son getting kidnapped makes you special. He's like, that's not an acceptable reason. And it like shows his character where he's like, no, the only honor here is that we're bad guys. Like, let's not pretend we're good people here.
Love it.
Watch Peaky Blinders.
Agreed.
I think Case will also recommend that people watch the highest critic score, which is Mad Max Fury Road, where he plays Rockatansky / Mad Max from 2015.
This film universe has impacted the industry more than any movie I've ever reviewed. And I'm actually glad Mike is here tonight because I'd be interested in getting his take on some of the filmmaking aspects of this. This one's a tough one to review because it's part of such a pivotal film franchise in the history of cinema. For those not completely familiar with the entire franchise, it requires a bit of a backstory before getting into the film. The entire franchise, start to finish, including the most recent Mad Max installment, has been directed by George Miller. The first installment of the franchise came in 1979 with Mad Max, followed in 1981 with Road Warrior, and in 1985 with Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome. The title role was originally played by Mel Gibson, which made him a household name in the 80s. The Mad Max saga is important in film history because of the incredible things George Miller accomplished through his work. Here are some of the impacts that I found through doing some research. A lot of reviewers have credited Mad Max for creating the dystopian future genre. It's associated so often to the genre that referring to something as a Mad Max scenario quickly describes a bleak and desolate future. Many films following the original release have borrowed Miller's view of a post-apocalyptic future time and time again. The film drew aesthetic themes from punk, rock and roll, and science fiction, which was not commonly done in film, especially mainstream cinema, which would have been Road Warrior and Thunderdome. And the movies blended so many genres together that by the time he was done making Thunderdome in 85, a lot of filmmakers started moving forward, blending a lot of strange and abstract themes together in movies. Now let's get into this movie. It's a 2015 Australian post-apocalyptic action film by George Miller. It's the fourth out of 5 installments in the MMCU, or as the kids like to call it, the Mad Max Cinematic Universe. I think it was trending on, is it TikTok? Is that the one? All right. It takes place in a desert where petrol and water are scarce commodities and follows Tom Hardy, who plays the title role of Mad Max, who joins forces with our favorite, Charlize Theron, who plays Furiosa, on a vicious and action-packed road battle fleeing from warlord Immortan Joe. It's truly a jam-packed movie start to finish. It flies by. One thing that makes this movie amazing is this, despite being the title role, Tom Hardy is not the central character to this movie. It's actually Charlize Theron in her height as a total badass. I think that's one of the reasons that this movie ringed really popular with critics, because I think they anticipated George Miller, shoving a new version of Mad Max down our throats. And he did a really, really good job using Theron in this movie. However, what happened before and during the filming is going to be what I want to discuss. Miller conceived the idea of this movie in 1987, or began pre-production in 98. However, issues with 9/11, the Iraq War, and controversies surrounding a certain Mel Gibson halted filming so long that by the time they were ready to make this movie, Miller felt Gibson was too old to play the lead character, and he chose Hardy to reprise the role in 2010. Film was a major success in the box office with fans and critics. It has a 97 critic and an 86 fan on Rotten Tomatoes. It received heavy award consideration, actually becoming the highest awarded film in Australian film history. And it should be noted that this was also nominated for Best Picture and Best Director that particular year. It sounds like a beautiful and smooth ride, right? Well, nope. As it was later confirmed in a book, Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, filming on the set was extraordinarily demanding, and the stars hated each other. Hardy would eventually publicly apologize to Theron for his behavior and his approach to this role and how he was performing it. And he admitted by saying that he was probably in over his head when he was cast in this movie. Also fed to the massive strife on set was the different of acting styles, with Tom Hardy being more of a method actor and Charlize Theron being very efficient and disciplined in her approach. Grueling conditions, filming in a desert, and Miller was giving very vague direction to the two stars, and Charlize Theron was flying through her lines, getting through scenes, and Tom Hardy was just drilling down with Miller, trying to really get some direction out of it. And Miller even said that maybe he could have done better with that. But it all ends well. As the film turned out to be a masterpiece, it was reported that as a token of reconciliation and making amends, Tom Hardy painted a self-portrait as a gift that he sent to Theron. Very strange gift, but it oddly feels par for the course on this film. The end.
That's incredible.
The painting was a gift, Todd. I'm keeping it. That's what it is.
Especially when you have a budget like this movie had, it is amazing to me that they had so many issues on set and it just didn't crater the movie.
Correct.
Because it doesn't take much to get, especially something with a lot of money on the line, off the tracks, and then it's just a world of hurt. I think this movie is one of those that you really want to live in the world that they're creating, and so the world building is so important there. Knowing that it's, something that really set the tone for a post-apocalyptic world. The grade and the look of this film is unlike pretty much anything else that I've ever seen. And I think that also really contributes to kind of that world building of like, it's easy when you go post-apocalyptic to have it just be desolate, desaturated, dark, that kind of thing, like a Blade Runner kind of thing. But this one kind of went the opposite way, which is really fascinating as well, but I think really plays into everything that they're going for when you think of kind of this like punk rock, renegade, rebel. It's a lot of like fighting back and a lot of energy, and I think it matches it really well.
These two actors not only fought, Charlize Theron like had security around her because she didn't feel comfortable alone being around Tom Hardy because of how threatened she felt by him. And the whole movie is just them two in a car together. So like for this to not go off the rails based on what happened behind the scene, they could not have been closer to one another throughout all of filming, and they made this incredible movie. Tom Hardy's reflected on it, as Case mentioned. They've both kind of taken blame for it. I'll give them credit. Looking back, they handled it really maturely now, where they both were like, yeah, it was probably my fault. But Tom Hardy's reflected a little bit more on it, and he's mentioned that like his son was 3 at the time, and this was the first time he was going to be on set away from his son, and it was going to be for almost a year. And he had to like grapple with missing the age of 3 to 4, add the grueling set, him having issues with Charlize Theron. It came to a head once where, she's dressed and ready at 8 a.m. and he shows up late, and like the staff knew she was going to blow up on him because she refused to like get off of the rig and was like in character and just sat there and waited until he showed up. And they're like, oh no, like she's using this as an example to explode on him. And she did in front of everyone. He responded in a way that I don't think people would expect, which was he met that aggression with over-aggression. And he, at 8 a.m., came right back at her and was in her face. And that's when she's like, oh shit, like this guy kind of looks like he's about to like fight me right now. And that's when she was like, I'm not comfortable around him. I need security. And when he looks back, he's like, I was like a dipshit. I was going through a lot. I didn't know how to handle who I was. He's like, looking back, I think if I was older and, as mature as I am now, I wouldn't have done what I did. But it's crazy that through all that, we get this incredible movie.
This movie's a masterpiece. This is my pretentious movie critic statement. Watching Mad Max Fury Road, all of the many times I've watched it, it's like a spiritual experience. Full-on masterpiece. It's perfect.
It's just a great year for film, especially for Tom Hardy, because you have Legend, where he played the Cray brothers, Ronald and Reginald Cray, 2 very different characters alongside Chaz Palminteri. So he got a chance to do something very different in playing 2 brothers. They're both gangsters. One that's a little bit more principled, and the other one who's definitely has some mental health issues that hasn't been addressed. And the 2 versions of himself have to manage each other.
He fought himself.
Yep.
Again, an accent that's like, where is this from?
It's cool to see, though. Just see him flexing some different muscles. And then that same Oscars year, he gets an Oscar nomination, his first Oscar nom for his role as John in The Revenant alongside Leo.
How is that his first Oscar nomination?
It's his only one, isn't it?
Yeah. This is it.
Which is also insane to me.
I mean, if you look at the roles before, Mad Max was such a spectacle that the acting kind of took a back seat from a nomination standpoint. And then, Locke was never going to be a film that was going to be on people's radars at that time. Dark Knight Rises, like, were they given comic book movie villain? But they gave it to Heath the year before, so I don't know.
I do think that probably overshadowed him just a little bit. How do you follow that up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He should have got nominated for Bronson.
Yeah, I agree. Hell, you can even make case for Lawless in some capacities too.
Yeah.
First Oscar nomination, and he's pretty ruthless in this one too. And he gets overshadowed again by Leo in this too, unfortunately.
He does a little bit. I do think he holds his own, very much so. The Revenant, I think, is still probably one of my favorite movies, and I think it's probably more so because of the cinematography behind it. It's just every time I watch this, every scene is just beautiful, and they're all just a little different in the stylistic nature of like kind of the smooth, continuous, controlled camera movements with what are always violent and chaotic scenes. Just it's a style that you just haven't really seen. And this is Emmanuel Lubezki's, some of his best work.
Yeah.
And it's obviously like complemented with this incredible cast. But man, this one just catches my eye every time and just it draws you in from the beginning and never lets you go.
Let me clarify. When I say overshadowed, I don't mean that Leo was like miles better than him in this film. It was just Leo. This was his like legacy career Oscar that year.
For sure.
That they're like, oh, we finally got to give him an award. So whatever Tom was doing was just getting overshadowed by the legacy campaign for an Oscar.
For sure.
The stuff outside of the movie overshadowed Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
But I've had legit, like, full-on conversations about who gives a better performance in this movie between the two of them. I just think he's great to go toe-to-toe with Leo with everything that Leo has to do. There's much more that Leo has to do, and to be able to go toe-to-toe with him in that, but also to create a credible antagonist is vital to this movie working as well as it does. And so what Tom Hardy has to do is extremely difficult. And again, it's presence. He's able to match arguably the best actor of all time in on-screen presence, which is an insane thing to be able to do.
They're both fantastic. I do think your point is well taken, though.
Well, I will say that when this movie came out, I remember a big talking point was people. First, it was, oh, is Leo finally going to get his Oscar, which he's deserved many times over? But then, other than that, it was people saying, was he the best actor in this movie? Because of how good Tom Hardy was. But that was the debate. It wasn't, one or the other. It's like, no, both were really good. It's just who was the better.
Let's jump to our largest critic app, which is going to be London Road, where he plays Mark, 2015, and Mike's got it.
This one was very interesting. It was unlike anything else that I have seen. To give you a little background on it, so London Road is a story that's based on true events told in form of like a musical / documentary. It is based on true events that in 2006, where basically a serial killer killed 5 prostitutes over the course of a year or two, I believe it was. In 2011, it was adopted into a musical, which I find also 5 years, I feel like is a little too close to like make something a musical over something like that.
Yeah, I agree.
And then after that, 4 years later, it was adopted into London Road, the film, which we're speaking of now. It was adapted from primary source audio interviews, and the film essentially focuses on the time period shortly after the discovery of the final 2 murders, 5 total, through the ensuing months of the murderer's arrest and trial as a small town copes with the horrific events, life after those events, and then the fallout from the limelight for a series of such heinous, violent crimes. So it's a really interesting take on what happened. You don't see any of the murders. We never meet the murderer. We never meet any of the victims. It's purely focused on that town and kind of what it's like in the aftermath of that. So Tom Hardy plays a very small role in the film. I believe he only appears in 2, maybe 3 scenes. He's essentially like a cab driver in the area who kind of sings a song about like knowing a little bit about like serial killers as he's driving a woman through to her home in London Road, and you're, as an audience, you're kind of like a little suspicious of like, is this dude the serial killer? He like knows a little too much about this stuff, and then he talks about how he's a big fan of this kind of thing and did a ton of research in his teens. So it's a very small role. To kind of sum up here, I would say like overall, the subject matter of the film is super interesting, paints a very realistic picture of the suspicions and unease of people living in this very small town, as well as some of the like finger pointing and interpretation of such events with personal implicit biases that come up quite a bit. But I think the format is just somewhat conflicting, and I think for me distracts from that core theme. Probably wouldn't recommend watching this unless you are kind of into that, like living in that space of awkward unease and tension. I don't think it's worth watching for Tom Hardy's role. I think he's fine, but it's certainly not a memorable role too.
Yeah, it feels like a film that hit the film festival circuits and just never really got out of them.
For sure. Exactly.
Basically. I saw Olivia Colman though. I mean, that's intriguing. I really enjoy Olivia Colman. So you're more on the critic side than the audience is here. 76-43.
Audience being the lower of that, yeah.
Yep.
I'm on the audience side for sure.
Okay.
I think there's an element of it or elements of it that are interesting and I think worth acclaiming critically, but overall, like for me, it doesn't overcome kind of the awkward fumbling of some of the themes at odds with each other.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
All right, back one last time with Chris Nolan, and who knows, there might be others, but Dunkirk, he played Farrier. Aubrey, you said he plays a pilot in this movie. I don't think he's in it a whole lot, right?
You see him quite a bit. He doesn't talk.
Yeah, he's a third of the movie, and he does not speak.
He doesn't talk, okay. And you don't see his face. You see his eyes. You don't really know it's him until the end.
Yeah, Nolan very much does Nolan things with this, where Nolan loves manipulating time in movies like Christopher Nolan. He can't ever stop doing it. And in this movie, he tells the Battle of Dunkirk in 3 different timelines. And in Tom Hardy's, it's the shortest timeline, but it's still a third of the movie. And I want to say it takes place over the course of like an hour while he's flying the plane.
Good description.
Great movie.
It's very well acclaimed too. High audience and critic scores too. Let's get to the real main feature here, and that is our largest audience gap. And that is James is ready to finally do a deep dive review on Venom, Eddie Brock. And I'm sure he'll have thoughts on the 2 sequels that have come since.
Yeah, I'm just going to knock them all out at once. Critics gave 30%, audience 80%. That's the first one. On the second one, Venom, They'll Let There Be Carnage. Critics 58%, audience 84%. And then the last one that came out last year, Venom, The Last Dance. Critics 40%, audience 80%. So pretty consistent. We got 50-point difference, 30-point difference, and then 40. So we'll split and say the average is 40-point difference between critic and audience on all 3 movies, which is remarkable. I think to tell the story of this movie, first you have to share that background on Venom as a character. This is not a bad guy from Spider-Man that was beloved. This is not a character that everyone's like, oh, finally, they're going to tell the Venom story. This is a character that was a marketing ploy. It was a really cool design. It's a jacked Spider-Man wearing all black that looks like a monster. That looks cool. And we sold that throughout the 90s, and everyone's like, yeah, that's cool. Very cool origin story. Oh, it's a symbiote, which I don't really know what that means, but it's like a goo from space. And when it gets here, it latches onto people and it makes them bad. Cool origin story. Other than that, he wasn't like the guy, right? And so anytime they've tried to shoehorn him into Spider-Man movies, it's just been like, hey, you get to watch the body transformation stuff, and then it becomes kind of a one-trick pony. And so when this movie got announced, it was like Spider-Man was torn between Fox and Sony. Who has the rights? Is Spider-Man even going to be in this movie? Spoiler alert, he's not. They wanted to, it was just in production hell from the jump. And then you see the cast that is mentioned for it, and it's pretty impressive, right? It's Tom Hardy, it's Michelle Williams, it's like Riz Ahmed when he was getting Oscar nominated, he was getting Oscar buzz for other roles, like big names in their prime. I'll say this, the first movie is clearly been chopped up in post-production like 20 different ways because there are some plot lines that don't even get like acknowledged, right? Like,
Yep.
that doesn't go anywhere. Why is someone doing this? Why is this supposed to be surprising? You also couldn't tell if it was supposed to be a gritty movie or a cheesy movie or action movie. Like, you could tell there was just disagreements on what it was supposed to be. But the one thing everyone did agree on is the parts of the movie that they liked were like the kind of like intentionally corny funniness of it. And a lot of that had to do with the way they made Venom as a character play off of Tom Hardy. And that was only like, I'm not even sure if it was intentional in the first one, but that was the part that everyone's like, well, I did kind of like that aspect of it. And then the second one, they just fully committed to that. And that is where I would say, Kyle and I saw it in theaters and everyone's like, this movie is stupid. And I agree, it is stupid, but that's what makes it fun. They went a completely different direction than a lot of the other Marvel movies where they were like, hey, this alien that's taken over his body and making him evil, well, he's actually like not that bad of a guy, and he's just kind of a loser on his alien planet. And yes, he does eat brains, but like he can be negotiated, and he'll eat stray cats and dogs. And it's like a buddy humor movie where it's like, hey, we got to go stop this bad guy, and he's like, yeah, but you should also like text your girlfriend, man. Like, you really miss her, and it's like intentionally dumb but funny. And I did like where they went with that, and so I think with the second one, I think it's the best of the three, and it's very stupid, but it's funny. And I enjoyed the stupidness of it. I think the action is fun. Again, though, they introduce plot points that don't really get resolved, but you don't go into this movie thinking you're going to see high art. In the third one, they fully commit to it being like, we're not even going to try to make it dramatic. We're going to introduce words that you've never heard before or should care about just to drive the plot along. But it's a full-on road trip movie with an alien and a beat-up, down-on-his-luck reporter, Tom Hardy, who's just happy to not be dead. And it's a road trip movie that culminates with a Power Rangers-esque fight scene. I think it started off in such a bad place. They're like, all right, well, what do we make this movie out to be? And they went with, what if we just had dumb fun? And I appreciate that because you don't get a lot of that, especially with every Marvel movie having to be kind of falling into the Star Wars trend now where it has to play into the larger story. I like that they're like, nah, this doesn't play into anything. It's just stupid fun. Do I like that Tom Hardy is going for like a Nicolas Cage, like full-on weirdo performance? Yeah, I actually do like it. Does it work every time? No, but it's good to turn your brain off for a couple hours and just be like, oh, look, he turned the horse into an alien. That's cool.
The franchise that takes itself less seriously with every installment.
For sure. Absolutely, for sure.
I haven't seen the original one in a while, and I was like, oh yeah, this is kind of stuffy. Like it doesn't really lean too much into the camp. And by the second one, it's just full buddy comedy ridiculousness, and it sounds like the third one's more of that. So there's no Michelle Williams in the third one either. So, judge accordingly. Juno Temple comes into the frame there.
There's a good amount of heart in the third one, I do think, and I think one of the really overarching like redeeming qualities of it is you get a lot of that like relationship between Eddie and Venom, and it's definitely enjoyable. And I also like that, I'm not a huge Marvel fan, but I do think after so many superhero movies, like you gotta loosen up a little bit on some of them, and they've definitely done it with this franchise.
I agree. It's like a bromance road trip movie.
Yeah. It's also just another great example and opportunity for Tom Hardy to flex his like character voice range and making a character like Venom come to life, which is so perfect for the character, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, what he did with the Eddie Brock was supposed to be like this cocky, like in the Spider-Man movies, he's this cocky asshole who's just like trying to steal Peter Parker's life. And then in this one, he's like kind of like a progressive, undercover reporter who's just like not committed enough in his relationship. And like, all right, he's just seems like a good dude. He's a bit of a loser, but he's a good guy. And I don't know, I just like where they were trying to take it, clearly didn't work. And then they're like, fuck it, let's just have fun with it.
Straight up B movies. Straight up B movies.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
That's cool. Michelle Williams is great in these movies, as she is in everything. She also looks phenomenal. There will always be room in my heart for the Venom movie, at least the first two. I don't know if I'll ever watch the third one again. It's a special kind of bad.
I was impressed in the original Venom. I was like, they did a pretty good job bringing that character to life.
It would have been really easy to mess it up or to make it feel fake, and it's really well done.
Sony's done plenty of chop jobs with stuff like that, Sony and Marvel. So
I think the first movie in particular, if they just had a better director and one writer, they had a good movie. There's a good movie in there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They were approaching
for sure
and trying to deal with really good and interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can assume Sony didn't let it come together the way that would have made it a good movie. But, I mean, you got something fun out of it, so it's a win-win.
Everybody wins. So last few roles here before we get to Munson Meter. Capone, he plays Al Capone in 2020's Josh Trank's film alongside Matt Dillon, where he plays a version of Capone who has gonorrhea or syphilis. I forget. It's bad.
I'll say this, the movie, not good, but this part of Capone's life really never put on film before. Movie is kind of loses its way. His performance, though, I respect it. He pretty much plays a guy who's going insane really well.
Mm-hmm.
But the movie itself isn't really good.
He shit the bed.
Well, yep, that is a factual statement. It sounds like some of us on this podcast might have done recently.
No comment.
Josh Trank hasn't been doing a lot of directing since then either, for rightful reason. So outside of acting, he won a Jiu-Jitsu championship in 2022. So the dude took his warrior skills and, was actually a martial artist in real life and doing cool shit.
That's awesome, especially for a dude with his time commitments here.
Mm-hmm.
Trains with his best friend Peanut,
Man's an athlete,
who's a mixed martial artist.
Every rapper has a best friend named Peanut.
Fits the bill. And last one I'll mention is the one I mentioned very briefly earlier, and that's the Bike Riders. And like I said, Jeff Nichols is the director of that film, and I just think he's like criminally underrated as a director.
Agreed.
So go see Bike Riders. I think it's Austin Butler's great in that movie. I think he's excellent in that film.
Oh yeah,
it's worth checking out.
Michael Shannon's great in this movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Good movie.
All right, Case, what do we got for top performances, man?
We have the 11 greatest films ranked worst to best from podcast favorite Gold Derby, released on September 5th, 2024. And they are ranked in order. It looks like we've discussed in depth 7 movies. We spoke briefly on another 3, and only 1 movie we didn't talk about, but we may have touched on it briefly. Bronson, regrettably, is not on the list.
What a son of a bitch.
Dunkirk
is number 4.
Dark Knight Rises, easy, right?
Dark Knight Rises, yeah.
Dark Knight Rises is number 3.
All right, keep on the Nolan train. Inception
is number 6.
Hit me with The Revenant.
The Revenant is numero uno.
So Mad Max is 2 then?
Gotta be.
Mad Max is number 2, correct.
Give me The Drop.
The Drop is the movie did we discuss that?
No.
That comes in at number 9.
Yep.
I love The Drop.
Yep, good movie.
Bike Riders
is number 7.
Ooh.
Filmed in Cincinnati, Ohio, mind you.
Well, that should have been number 1 then.
100%, but we don't make the list.
That's right. The wheel makes the list. Wait, no, that's a different thing.
Ace, give me Warrior.
Warriors, number 8. So we're missing 5, 10, and 11. Locke is number 5.
Nice.
By the way, this is an insane list, you guys.
So Black Hawk Down is 10 or 11, maybe?
His 5 minutes of screen time didn't make it.
Okay.
Lawless
is number 10, and number 11 is a pretty unique role.
Unique role. I like that tease. It's not Venom. There's no way it's Venom.
Legend.
Yeah, it's Legend.
Number 11 is Legend, where he plays twin brothers that are uniquely different.
That's a pretty damn good top 11.
Yeah.
That's a great list.
The top 3, The Revenant, Mad Max Fury Road, and The Dark Knight Rises. Holy hell, that's a top 3. I mean, the whole list is incredible, but that's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, which means Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy wasn't on there.
Crazy, right?
That was going to be my guess for 11. Yeah.
That's wild.
Also, just like wildly different roles in all three too. He's not playing. I mean, he very much plays like kind of a shallow-ish range of characters. All three of those are massively different.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Let's get into the Munson Meter. What we do, we rate every actor on a scale of 0 to 100 based on a variety of factors that could include anything from longevity, project choice, pop culture, acting range, awards footprint, other talents, personal life, comedic chops, box office success, or anything else that matters to us as Munsons. James, you get to go first.
I think Tom Hardy is one of the most versatile and captivating actors of the last few decades. I think he is impressive in almost everything I see him in. He's great with intense performances. He could do physical transformations and completely disappears into his roles. And I think that's since he's come on the scene, pretty much. He's got the range and versatility. He could play a villain, a flawed anti-hero, actual hero, all with authenticity. He bulks up to be these massive, brooding bad guys in Dark Knight Rises, to like wiry and unpredictable. And it's, I don't know, everything I see him in, I don't see, oh, that's Tom Hardy. I see the character he's playing. And I feel like that is a mark of a good actor and a movie star who is willing to do both the blockbuster performances, but also the more nuanced, dramatic performances that I agree. I think he deserves awards for at this point. He's like pretty much completely silent in Mad Max Fury Road and Dunkirk, and he still commands the screen just with the expressions he's using with his eyes and his mannerisms. I think where he is his best is when he's probably playing something close to who he is in his personal life, or at least where that pain might come from, where he's kind of on the edge of morality, and he brings a really depth to kind of outcast characters, which I think is probably hits a little bit closer to home for him. Where I'll critique him, I think I mentioned it, is his choice for accents. When they work, they really work, and when they don't work, it's just like confusing.
Yeah.
It can make the dialogue hard to follow, but like I think Alfie Solomon is one of my favorite performances of his, and I wouldn't understand a word if it wasn't for subtitles. The other thing is his filmography. I really appreciate that he's willing to do a wide array of things, but it does feel uneven. You know, you're getting the Revenant, and then you're also getting 3 Venom movies. So like it's all over the place. What I'll say to wrap up on Tom Hardy is I think he's once again one of the few actors who could do both blockbusters and art house films. He's got incredible charisma, and I think he's one of the most compelling actors working today. I think if he continues on this path and just pursues more character-driven roles in the occasional blockbuster, or a character-driven blockbuster like he's been able to pull off once or twice, I think he could cement himself as one of the all-time greats. Don't think he's there yet, so I'm going to give him an 84.
All right, Aubrey, you're up.
Tom Hardy is one of the ones that comes first to my mind when I think about great actors working today. I think he is legitimately one of the best actors working right now. His versatility and range are huge. He has movie star charisma. He's like a character actor movie star, which is weird. He can disappear into anything while still maintaining the presence and the charisma of a mainstream star. A lot of times with the biggest movie stars, we hear, they're just playing different versions of themselves, but they're always themselves. That can't be said about Tom Hardy, which I don't think it's a bad thing either way, but I marvel at what Tom Hardy can do as an actor. I think he's brilliant in all the ways that you can be.
Yeah.
He can communicate complex, layered, and nuanced emotion without saying anything. He can go big without it being cartoonish. He can command attention without saying anything. He can have an entire 80-minute movie shot in a car directly at his face while talking on the phone and make that work and compelling. I truly marvel at his ability. He's one of the most talented people that I've seen in a movie. There's other stuff I wish I would be able to see him do. I'd like to see him get recognized from award stuff. I'd like to see him play a little bit more just straight like movie star charisma type stuff. I'd like to see him in romantic comedies, things a little bit lighter. So while I see a lot of range and nuance from like a dramatic standpoint, I'd like to see it maybe from more of a genre standpoint, but the talent's there. So I'm going to go with a 90.
Good score. All right, Mike, what do you got?
Yeah, you guys have hit a lot of the high notes. I'll try not to get too repetitive here, but I share a lot of the same thoughts here. I think just pointing out a few things here, he just had an incredibly prolific stretch of films from like 2008 to like 2018-ish. I had a couple notes here of things that we hadn't mentioned that came up, but he did win in 2015 British Actor of the Year from the London Film Critics Circle Awards. 2015 was Legend, Mad Max Fury Road, and The Revenant, just like 3 bangers right there. I think Tom Hardy's voice and character choices and range are almost unmatched.
Yeah.
We've certainly had plenty of folks that can do a much wider, voices range, like a Jim Carrey, a Robin Williams. But when we're talking about what he chooses to do with like a Bane, for instance, it's incredible the choice that he makes and how well he makes it work that I think you just don't see very often. So I'll give him big points for that. He hasn't won a ton of awards. I don't really care too much about that. I think they will come in time. He is still relatively young, all things considered, right now. Like, he's not quite 50. And so lots of tread on the tire still. I think we've still got some incredible roles in his future. Another thing that I know sticks out to me, has come up before in interviews with other collaborators, is he's just incredibly talented as an actor, even when he has some of the tools that actors use removed from him or not in his arsenal. For instance, when he's in a car and by himself and not able to play off other people or react much in a scene beyond just the seat. Christopher Nolan has famously, as I'm sure you all have heard, has talked about how strong of an actor he is with his eyebrows and his eyes and his facial expressions.
Yeah.
And so, when he puts more and more things on his face in Dunkirk and in Dark Knight Rises, it's just like, it doesn't matter. Like, he's still got the acting chops to bring it through and to hammer those roles home. I don't think any of us think that Bane was any less impressive than it was, given some of those limitations. So lots to love here. I think we've got a lot of great things to go. I love, I don't think he has to have the largest range of any actor. We see him really well living between an everyman to a tough guy to like a mob boss kind of thing. I think he's crushing it. I don't think you need to do everything to be a fantastic actor. Just keep knocking those out. And then maybe we'll see the occasional new range that, just interests us even more. So without belaboring the point much further, I'm going to give him an 82. Probably could go higher, but I think we've got so much more to see from him at his age.
Love it. Case, what do you got?
Well, this is a rare one for me in that I had a pretty high starting score, but what I enjoyed rewatching a lot of his movies is I forgot how much he could melt into scenes, yet steal the scene, but also not take all the air out of the scene. The movie that stood out the most to me was Inception. I really had a hard time remembering him in that role, but as soon as I started watching the clips, I completely remembered him. And in fact, Lawless, I kind of forgot he was in Lawless, and then I rewatched that. I'm like, holy hell! Like he's the lead in this. A couple things that haven't been brought up yet is I really appreciate his struggle to become an elite actor. I feel like some of the other elite performers we've had, they had like career setbacks, not life setbacks. And I really admire his ability to push through on those things and continue to move forward. And the other thing that I really enjoyed about rewatching his stuff and looking at his career more, he makes really large and overt artistic choices where a lot of actors make real subtle ones. Like you think about like Brad Pitt eating a fruit in every scene. Like there's this little artistic move there. And Tom Hardy's doing it with crazy accents that are like major risks, and he's pulling it off. It just every movie that I watch with him in it, I feel like I like it more because of his performance and what he's doing with it. We might be in the middle of his heyday. And it's really fun to be looking at an actor at this stage of his career. And I'm shocked with where I kept climbing to my score. And I'm going to give him a 95.
Atta boy.
Damn. All right, there you go. I don't have anything new to add to it. I think you guys captured most of the sentiments, and I love James's score so much that I'm going to replicate it and give him an 84 as well.
Good score.
Very good score. Fair score.
Very, very fair. With that, that's going to give Tom Hardy an 87 on the dot, which puts him in 12th place, right behind Adam Driver and Natalie Portman have a tied score, and right ahead of Emma Thompson.
I think he's amongst people who have the awards that I think we all in this podcast feel he'll get at some point. And so we might have pumped him up a little compared to the other award winners.
Yeah.
He's in the right spot.
So he ranked 15th in all of our comparative numbers. But when you take every metric that we track from like all the budget stuff, all the like highest opening, lowest opening, everything that I can track, if you rank him in those categories, he's 8th. So he's 8th with all data ranked, and he's 15th with comparative data ranked. And that lands him pretty much at 12, right in the middle.
Love it.
It's weird. It's like we've been doing this for a little bit. That's wild.
Yeah.
All right, Aubrey, he's got a bunch of stuff coming. What are the big ones here?
Yeah, he's got a ton. So I'll go over 3, which will be soon. So if you've been waiting for Tom Hardy stuff, which I'm sure James and I just sit around waiting for the next Tom Hardy project, it's happening soon. Mobland is, I think, a Paramount Plus TV show or TV series that starts at the end of March.
Yeah.
It's basically showcases 2 generations of gangsters, their businesses, and the relationships they weave, and the man they call to fix their problems. The cast is crazy in this. So you have Tom Hardy, Helen Mirren, Pierce Brosnan, Paddy Considine from House of Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
For all my Downton Abbey heads out there, you know I'm always thinking about Downton Abbey. Anna Bates is in this also. Havoc is a Netflix movie, which is usually not something that gets me excited, but anything with the subgenre on IMDb called Gun Fu is something I'm going to be interested in.
Hell yeah.
It's a Gareth Evans movie, which Gareth Evans writes really interesting movies.
He does.
With Timothy Olyphant, Forrest Whitaker, Luis Guzman. It's just going to be a really dope action movie. That's probably how I would describe that one. And then another Mad Max movie. Mad Max The Wasteland. There's not a ton with that, but the fact that it's already announced and in pre-production is really exciting.
Is Miller directing that one?
Yep.
Awesome. I'm here for that.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got a ton of other stuff coming. I mean, we're right in the middle of Tom Hardy's prime. This dude's just pumping out material, good material. So
Yeah.
Got like 10 other things that he's already attached to.
yeah, this dude's. Yep.
That's awesome.
Well, next episode's going to hit on April 3rd, and we have Marty Grohl coming back. He did Sam Rockwell, Chris Hemsworth, Haley Steinfeld, John Slattery, and Adam Driver. So lots of bangers there, too. I'll quickly list off the 5 actors that are on the wheel. You all tell me very quickly who you love, who you hate. Jason Schwartzman, Aidan Gillen, Clancy Brown, Annette Bening, and Michelle Monaghan.
I don't hate any of those.
That's good.
Pretty solid list.
I would say Aidan Gillen's probably the one whose filmography I know the least, but he was incredible as Littlefinger.
Yep. Get to watch that and Sing Street again.
Give me Talia Shire's son, Jason Schwartzman, so we can talk about Adrian.
There's a lot of Wes Anderson films, if it's Jason Schwartzman.
He was also in I Think You Should Leave skit, so we got that.
You guys know my choice. I want Clancy Brown because it's time to talk about 2 all-time greats in Shawshank Redemption and Pet Sematary 2. Let's go.
I looked him up earlier. He has 354 credits.
Wait, no.
That's way too many.
Good Lord.
I take it back. Clancy Brown would be a worst case scenario.
Plenty of viewing choices.
That's too many.
If that's the choice, I'm sick.
Yes, I fought through food poisoning tonight, but I definitely don't think I could fight through poisoning that night.
Mike, if you were going to come back, who would you pick of these 5?
I like Aidan Gillen a lot. I also like Jason Schwartzman. One of those 2. They're both very solid.
Okay.
I'm not a huge Wes Anderson fan, so.
How very uncinematographer-like of you. Oh, my God.
I know. He just got a style that's like, you love it or you hate it, and it's just not my taste.
Who's Marty picking of the group?
I think he's picking Schwartzman. I'm leaning that way.
I think he's picking Schwartzman also.
Well, Marty doesn't decide. Mike Rodmaker doesn't decide. Joe Dirt Nunamaker doesn't decide. The wheel decides, and we'll see what happens.
I haven't heard that in ages, Kyle.
You thought you could get through an episode without having a Nunamaker reference?
I did.
You're a fool. You're a fool.
I was about to pull a Bane imitation out and say that Bane decides, but I didn't have the courage to do it.
Well,
Does the wheel feel in charge?
Touche. Well
that's
done.
so good. That's so good. Mike, always love having you, man. This is your, little red carpet moment. We always offer it up for you for wise words or anything, any plugs you're working on.
You all kind of addressed it on the front end, but we live in crazy, tumultuous times, whichever side of the political spectrum you fall on. But I would say, as my wife reminds me all the time, that we all have, at least as Americans and generally as people, we all have more in common than we have against each other. And I would just say, vote with your dollar, research, be informed. Remember that everybody out there is a person that you have something in common with and you like. And I think if you remember those things, we can move the needle in this crazy world we're living in right now.
Hell yeah, that's well said.
You're here.
Grand unifier.
That was great.
Love it. Happy to have you back, Mike. We're always rooting for you, whatever you're working on out there.
Thanks, guys. It's always fun to hang out with you all. It's seriously a night I look forward to every time we get it on the calendar, and looking forward to the next one as always.
Yeah, buddy.
Well, as we wrap things up, you can find us on Instagram, Munsons at the Movies. You can email us, munsonsatthemovies@gmail.com. Any final thoughts from Tom Hardy?
I want him to acknowledge that his anger is fucking justified. I want him to acknowledge that he who fights by the sword, he fucking dies by it.
Munsons Out.
All right, let's go. Thank you for the education, gentlemen. We've just received a PhD in stupidity. Doctor, shall we?
How exactly is that supposed to help my company absorb Wayne?
Leave us.
No, you stay here. I'm in charge.
Do you feel in charge?